trying to avoid one kind of social media backlash, ESPN has stumbled into another with Asian announcer Robert Lee no longer assigned to call the University of Virginia's home football opener in Charlottesville. Really? We collectively made the decision with Robert to switch games as the tragic events in Charlottesville were unfolding, simply because of the coincidence of his name, ESPN said in a statement. In that moment it felt right to all parties. It's a shame that this is even a topic of conversation, and we regret that who calls play-by-play for a football game has become an issue. White nationalists, neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members clashed with counter-protesters in Charlottesville earlier this month during protests of the planned removal of a Robert E. Lee statue. A counter-protester, Heather Heyer, was killed and 19 others were injured when a man allegedly linked to neo-Nazi beliefs reportedly drove his car into a crowd. ESPN clearly didn't want any sort of repeat of the controversy over an auction segment that Charlottesville unrest cast in a light that disrupted its marathon celebration and promotion of fantasy football last week. But if its intent was to quietly get on with its business by reassigning one of the thousands of people in the United States named Robert Lee, or some variation thereof, from the ACC network Virginia William and Mary telecast on September 2 to Youngstown State at Pittsburgh, it was a failure of fantastic proportions. Not even ESPN's stalwart Bob Ley, the media giant's longest-serving commentator having been hired as a SportsCenter anchor on its third day of operation in September 1979, could resist poking fun, comparing it to the work of satirists. As news of the change in assignments for Robert Lee was broken by Clay Travis Outkick the Coverage blog, Ley tweeted Tuesday night, "Rather worried my employee ID/pass may not admit me in the AM. Life, as scripted by @Onion Sports." ESPN spokesman Derek Volner declined to say if the network made a preemptive decision or responded to outside pressure to pull Lee from the broadcast. He also did not say if Lee was made available for comment. Lee, a sportscaster for 20 years, began his career calling games at Syracuse University, his alma mater. He is bilingual and speaks Mandarin Chinese, according to his online resume. He did not respond to a request for comment on Twitter. Asian American Journalists Association did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Sports Illustrated writer Richard Deitch said on Twitter Lee was more comfortable not doing this assignment per an ESPN spokesperson. News of the unlikely coincidence gave social media users a rare chance to find glimmers of humor in an incident that sparked violence, a public affairs disaster at the White House, and increasing calls to remove Confederate monuments nationwide. ESPN apologized last week after what was intended to be an innocuous fantasy football segment because factions on social media coalesced around criticism that, in the shadow of Charlottesville unrest, its imagery connoted slave auctions of old. Others saw nothing wrong with the brief August 14 segment, which included an auctioneer and largely white assemblage of bidders looking to acquire players, both white and of color, and ripped the Disney-owned media giant for caving to pressure. The New York Giants' Odell Beckham Jr., who fetched $34 in the auction segment, was asked on Twitter what he thought of the video clip. Speechless, Beckham tweeted. ESPN, which prides itself on its record of inclusion and sensitivity, issued an apology, saying it understood the optics could be portrayed as offensive under some circumstances.